The movie begins in Paris, where an assassin sits by a window, lost in thought. Suddenly, his timer goes off, jolting him awake from his near slumber. After some time, he rises, still feeling thirsty, and looks out of the window. He wears his gloves, and it is revealed that he is known only as the killer. He settles back in his chair, wears earphones, and observes the bustling streets below. It seems like he is waiting for someone. After some time, he decides it's time for some physical activity, so he engages in yoga and push-ups. This is to ensure that he maintains a proper sitting posture. Once done, he finally leaves the room, going down a couple of flights of stairs. As he exits the building, he wears shades and a hat, concealing his identity. With his phone, he scans a bike nearby, presumably planning his next move. After quickly grabbing supplies from a nearby cafe, the killer jumps on a phone call with someone, mentioning that they have waited 5 days and will only wait 2 more. The person on the other end is revealed to be an attorney and his former university law professor, Eddie Hodges. After this, he heads back up to the building. A narrator explains that the killer refuses to book any more Airbnbs due to hidden nanny cams. He resumes watching the everyday people below, waiting for his target. As night falls, he sets up his sniper rifle, aiming it out the window. Suddenly, someone behind him opens the door to the room. The killer holds his sniper at the ready, but the person turns out to be a mail carrier dropping off some mail before leaving. As the day breaks, the killer remains glued to the window, feeling the weight of boredom in his profession. To keep himself occupied, he thinks of some creative ways to carry out his job, like staging accidents or using slow-acting poisons. After completing some mundane tasks like disinfecting the sink, he settles down for a nap, setting an alarm to check on his target periodically. During one of his wake-up checks, he notices movement at his target's place. A car pulls up, and a housemaid begins preparing for a VIP's arrival. Quickly, the killer readies his sniper rifle, adjusting his bed for a better vantage point. As he watches, more people start entering the building, signaling that the moment of action may be approaching. As more guests arrive, including the maid guiding a woman to a room, the killer puts on his earphones and observes. He follows the action, pulling up his hoodie and muttering a cryptic quote. Despite the tension, he remains focused, keeping an eye on his target through the scope of his rifle. Suddenly, his watch alerts him to an increase in his heart rate. He takes a moment to reflect on his actions, which surprisingly calms him down. Then, he takes his position again and waits patiently for his target to come into view from his window. The killer takes a shot but misses his target when a guard closes the blinds unexpectedly. He quickly packs up his weapons and puts on a motorcycle helmet. Then, he rushes to his scooter and speeds away, avoiding the police who swarm the area. Trying to escape, he throws his gun into a passing garbage truck and keeps going. But soon, police surround him on the streets. He thinks fast, darting through alleys and narrowly escaping. Finally, he leaves his bike and climbs the stairs, disappearing into the city's maze. After tossing his helmet, the killer heads to the nearest gas station, known for its grimy public toilets. He gives himself a quick makeover and then gets in a nearby cab to go to the airport. However, he spots a Belgian Malinois in line and decides to avoid it. After freshening up and getting a plane ticket, he calls a contact to update them on the situation. Boarding the plane, he notices a suspicious-looking man. Later, upon arrival, he locks eyes with the same man. As he waits for his next move, he learns about a delayed flight option with a voucher for accommodation. He takes the offer and heads to his hotel room, successfully evading capture for now. Then, he places a glass cup on the door handle and settles on the couch. The next day, he quietly leaves his hotel and heads to his next flight. With his earphones in, he flies to his next destination. After landing, he drives through beautiful scenery until he arrives at a gated area. Seeing boot marks, he realizes someone might be inside. He grabs a pistol and jumps the gate. He sprints until he reaches a mansion, where he finds blood inside. Then, he makes a call and rushes to a hospital experiencing power outages. There, he finds a woman in critical condition called Magdala. She is revealed to be the killer's wife. Magdala's brother Marcus explains to the killer that his sister described the 2 people who attacked her. She mentioned a woman and a man, and although she managed to stab the man and hide. Sitting by her bedside, Magdala wakes up and assures him she didn't say anything about him, even under pressure. With that, he leaves the hospital and starts investigating. He opens a hidden underground safe and the next day, he begins packing his bags. He sets out on a drive through town, keeping an eye out for the vehicle that left his house. As night approaches, he goes to a company that rents out vehicles and asks if he can get an emergency driver. When they open the door for him, he digs through their database until he finds the driver he's looking for. He tracks down a man named Leo. Then, he sends a package through the mail to Hodges' secretary Dolores. He spots Leo and tails him until he asks for a ride. During the ride, the killer taps his pistol on the glass, and the driver hands over his wallet. But the killer isn't after money, he wants information. The boy knows exactly who he's talking about and calls the two he escorted to the killer's house freaks. He gives the killer the description and says he was pretty much forced to drive them. He shares the story of how he took them to a hidden mansion and was forced to wait until they returned. But the killer couldn't care less and ends up killing the driver. Then, he leaves the country and heads to New Orleans, making a stop at a storage facility to park his van. He gets some guns, files, and a new number plate for his new work vehicle. Some power tools seem useful, and he even grabs a banana. The killer spots Dolores, and it seems it's time to execute his plans. He fakes being a garbage man and enters the building. After arriving on his level, he starts counting in his head how long the door takes to close. He approaches the door and takes a drink from a bubbler. Once the opportunity presents itself, he manages to keep the glass door open. When the woman sees him, she is petrified. The killer holds her and then holds Hodges at gunpoint. The man seems to recognize the killer and his line of work. He tells Dolores to comply with his demands. After locking her in the bathroom, Hodges says that he was forced to do this when the killer missed the shot against a very powerful man. Hodges is one of the leaders that the killer was working for. He tells the killer the only solution for survival is to disappear. Then, Hodges goes into a backstory, saying he brought everything from the ground up. But the killer wants to know where his backups are. Hodges says there is nothing and that the killer will not dare to harm him. However, Hodges is mistaken and is shot in the chest by a nail gun. After this, the killer says that Hodges has 6 minutes to save himself. Unfortunately, Hodges dies on the spot, and the killer's timing is way off. After this, he heads to kill Dolores but quickly finds out that she knows the names he's looking for. However, she tells the killer that she will only provide him the information on the condition that he promises to give her a natural death so that her children can get the insurance money. He approaches her, and although his mind tells him empathy is a weakness, he doesn't listen to the voice and cuts her free. Problematically, she sees Hodges and passes out. After the killer chucks Hodges into the garbage can, the scene cuts to later that night when Dolores is taken for a drive. When they stop and the killer exits the van, she screams and tries to escape, but the killer stops her just in time. Eventually, she helps him go through all the files to find the subcontractors who broke into his house. He only finds a name, Claiborne, the client. Once finished, he psychotically kills Dolores by snapping her neck and throwing her down a flight of stairs to make it look like an accident. Then, he complains about always having to clean up. He makes his way to a motel to catch some sleep after cleaning his van and grabbing a bite. After this, he heads to Florida. He arrives at the address provided by Dolores and spots some men at the location. As night approaches, the killer spots the men from earlier leaving. He decides to follow them and sees one of the men heading back to his house. He approaches the fence and spots a massive dog barking at him. He tosses it some food, which it eats, and runs back to its owner. He once again patiently waits, but this time enters the property when the dog isn't present. He stealthily walks around to find the dog napping and continues until he walks into the house through the front door. The man inside is having a shower, and the killer creeps to the bathroom and hears the knobs turning. He gives himself another speech but is run into by a man who quickly shows the killer how tough he actually is. When the killer is pinned to the ground, he gets back up, but their fight rages on and breaks everything around the house. After the killer breaks multiple items on the man's face, he puts him in a chokehold, but the man escapes, and the two continue breaking everything they see in sight. The man reaches for a gun but gets injured in the process. The killer arms himself with whatever he can find and hides behind a door. The injured man approaches, bleeding out, and walks towards the final door. The killer finds a pistol, injures the man, and then finishes him off. He then sprints for his life when the dog chases him, and when he's safe, he throws a Molotov cocktail to burn the house and cover his tracks. The following day, he makes his way to the airport once again. He boards his next flight and travels to New York City. This time, he uses public transport and goes to rent a car for himself. Soon enough, he arrives at the subcontractor's supposed house and watches it like he watched the others. He takes a much-needed rest and waits until nighttime when he spots a woman with the same description the taxi driver had told him earlier. As soon as she starts driving, the killer quickly follows, making sure to keep some distance. The woman goes to turn right, and the killer jumps in the left lane to finish the job but hears sirens in the distance and stops. He keeps following the car, and when it stops, so does he. It seems she's made her way to the waterfront and is having a really fancy meal. He goes back into talking to himself mode, and soon enough, forcefully takes a seat at her table and aims his gun at her. For a killer, she buckles quite a bit. She introduces herself as the expert and asks the killer if he finally gave Hodges a horrific death. As the killer remains quiet, the expert tries to use some friendly tactics and offers him food. Another tactic she tries is telling him that she had nothing to do with hurting his wife, it was the brute who did everything. But the killer already took care of him, and he just stares at his next victim while she blabbers about morality and the hypocrisy of their work. She also tells him that he could have killed her in so many ways but chose to talk to her. With that, he takes her outside and makes her walk as she blabbers and tries to use reverse psychology. She even fakes breaking her leg, but the killer just shoots her clean in the head. However, the killer hasn't finished his hunt quite yet and is looking for his next victim with such a high-class profile. This job isn't going to be that easy. He stakes out the man's residence and heads up the car park when he sees an opportunity, running into a door handle that won't open. The killer simply searches for a fob copier on Amazon and spots his target sitting in the car at night. He links up with a man selling him some weapons. After receiving his Amazon delivery, the killer goes to the gym where his target trains. He swipes the janitor's card and goes inside the changing rooms. He finds his target and follows him to work out using the janitor's card. The target's locker opens, and the killer takes a card from a wallet inside. Using the device he bought earlier, he copies the card and promptly returns it to the target's wallet. With that, he waits until the gate opens for the building's car park and uses the card he had created to open the door. Using the nearby elevator, the killer heads up to level 27 and walks right into the billionaire's abode. The man chooses which bottle he wants to drink and gets scared once he sees the killer. His name is Claiborne, and he has no idea who the killer is and offers money. But when the gun is pointed at him, he almost begs until the killer asks him if there is a problem between them. Clay is over the top confused but quickly realizes what's going on. When he sees the card that the killer showed him, he explains that after he missed the shot, Hodges recommended that insurance must take place and the killer be removed. Then, Clay uses his billionaire's golden tongue and genuinely tells the killer he has no issue or problem with him. The killer believes him and tells him that if he ever tries to come in his way, he will give him a slow and painful death. After that, he simply walks out of the room. He heads to the Dominican Republic where he enjoys a nice cup of tea with his now-healed wife.
Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.